is that Chelsea have won the Club World Cup. They are the world champions, if you want to follow the script of the organisers. They beat Paris Saint-Germain, yes, all conquering Paris Saint-Germain by 3-0 in a game that's not ended very long ago. And it was a real football match, 81,000 people there, including Donald Trump sitting next to Gianni Infantino. More about that later. And it ended with a punch-up between the players and perhaps a real problem for Luis Enrique. But first, and we will get into the showcasing and the bans and all the rest of it and what it all means, this tournament. But let's talk about the football match, Andy, because I don't know if anyone ever practices jiu-jitsu anymore. The martial arts change so quickly these days. But when I was a kid, everybody wanted to do jiu-jitsu. And it's a sport, it's a martial art in which you use the strength of your opponent against them. I know, it doesn't sound right, does it? And I thought in that first half, allowing for the fact that Robert Sanchez had a very good game as well, Chelsea really did exactly that to Paris Saint-Germain. They outpressed Paris Saint-Germain, the thing that they have been doing against everybody else, overrunning in the pressing game. Chelsea are brilliant at it. And then, of course, they've got enough talent and people like Cole Palmer to take advantage of the possession they won.
Yes, that's true. I think if we look at where Chelsea really stood a chance going into this final, and yes, I said it on a recorded podcast on Friday, so it's not like I'm just saying it off the back of the result.
You're right so often. I presume that you record 3 different podcasts and put out the one where you're right after the event.
You know what? I'll start doing that in future. I think that could be the way forward. Look, I think if there was a way that Chelsea were going to win this, it's by doing exactly what all the Premier League clubs who've caused PSG problems in the last 6 months have done. I think despite the fact that they got the better of Arsenal in the semi-final of the Champions League, that they got the better of Aston Villa in the quarter-final, that they got past Liverpool on penalties, you have to say that in a year that Paris Saint-Germain dominated so far, it's the English clubs that have given them the biggest trouble. Now, you might say, okay, financially, there are reasons for that. I think where the Premier League has come to dominate so much in recent years is the fact that they've been able to buy the best coaches. Now, Enzo Maresca maybe doesn't quite belong to the elite coaches yet. I think this would be a card to say he's on his way, to say he's certainly learning and learning fast, especially when he's been under immense pressure for results under the last couple of months. And there have been parts of the Chelsea fan base that have doubted him. I'm sure there have been people in the boardroom at Stamford Bridge that have doubted him as well. For him to produce something like this and to get his team to produce something like this after such a physically and emotionally taxing season is impressive. It felt like a game too much for PSG, and it felt like a game too much against Premier League opposition for PSG to me, because there are not many teams who would be able to do what Chelsea did. They were smart, but they were also very young and very fit. I thought that made a massive difference. And if we're talking about it being a little step too far for PSG as well, they've been playing pretty much the same side for all of this Club World Cup. Very few changes by Luis Enrique after a very long season. That was a calculated gamble by him. Against Premier League opposition, I guess you have to ask whether it was the right gamble. I mean, you look at the bench and maybe he doesn't have much option as things stand at the moment. And, no one's really pleading poverty for PSG. Of course, they're very, very well resourced. There's no doubt about that. But I thought the things that made a difference this evening is having no real backup for Vitinha. And really, I think they could have done with a more orthodox defensive midfielder in there, because that was really where Cole Palmer was able to make hay. And the other thing is those two defenders, and especially William Pacho, getting sent off in the quarter-final against Bayern and not being able to be there. Of course, Pacho and Luka Hernandez going back to France before even the semi-final, which I think is a sensible thing in terms of preparing for next season. But Pacho in particular, who was so important, and actually in that second leg at Aston Villa, where they were getting absolutely battered for about 25 minutes in the quarterfinal, Pacho was the one who just about held it together, even though he had one of his poorer games of the season. So I think it would have been easy to see PSG get over the line here and think, how do you improve this team? I think this really underlines the depth that they need and where they might need to improve for next season.
Yeah. I mean, of course, we should make the point here, at least I'm going to make the point that their next proper fixture, Paris Saint-Germain, is against another Premier League team in Udine. In about 4 weeks' time, they take on Spurs in the Super Cup. So I'm afraid that the Premier League keep coming at them, although this is the 17th best team in the Premier League on current form that they're taking on. Chelsea, look, you can... The way they spend their money, how they got through the financial fair play hoops and all the rest of it, that's not for this. We've talked about this a dozen times on the programme. Their players were terrific tonight, and you're absolutely right, Andy. In conditions that, unusual to them, their physical running power and their youth, I think, saw them compete at a level that Paris Saint-Germain struggled with.
Yeah, and they were great all over. And I think if you go back to the last time they dominated Europe, when they won the Champions League under Tuchel, it was a really similar recipe, actually. The physical power of that Chelsea team in the last 6 months of that season under Tuchel was outstanding. That's how they won that Champions League, and that's how they've ended up winning this trophy tonight. Thoroughly deserved, of course. And Cole Palmer, again, really, really outstanding. And you talked about your sunburn from this afternoon. He looked like he was getting sunburnt while the game was going on, Cole Palmer, and yet still managed to find those spaces. Now, it's really interesting to me, that fact that Vitinha, who has been, I think, one of the candidates for the Ballon d'Or, I don't think it's unreasonable to say.
It's been terrific, of course.
It will probably be Ousmane Dembele still, and I don't have any massive problem with that in a year where the field's been quite open. And, I don't think this is the point of football or anything like that. The point of football is winning, and, Chelsea have got there and they deserve it. But I think if we're looking at ways of improving a team that we all felt after the Champions League final we're going to dominate Europe for years to come, and maybe them and Barcelona, financial issues notwithstanding, which we have to add as a caveat every time we talk about Barcelona, could be the two teams that will really dominate European football for the next couple of years. This was an underlining that PSG are not perfect, and actually there is a degree of risk in playing with a defensive midfielder that's not really a defensive midfielder when you dominate by controlling the ball. And, there's more than one way to win a football match.
Yeah, and it's also an example, as you rightly pointed out, that, they made great play of the fact that on their way to winning the Champions League, they had taken out one after another the cream of the Premier League. The trouble with the Premier League is there's a lot of cream and it keeps on coming. And, Chelsea have already re-upped from the team that was in the Premier League last year. We've seen the big Premier League clubs spending plenty of money already to improve their teams. Christian Wirtz turning out Liverpool is the most obvious example. Andy, so congratulations to Chelsea. And one thing I always like to say, my love in football is great players. My pet hate is injuries when, even if it had nothing to do with my club. To see Reece James getting the trophy was really a joy, I think, because I think he's a brilliant footballer. But his last 3 years have been absolutely blighted with injuries. So great to see him pick up the trophy.
Agree.
And the game ended in what can be described as if you're Scottish, a stramash. Let's call it a fracas and pretend we're French. A punch-up. And at the centre, the players were really going for each other. It was a bit, I thought, following the sending off, all PSG's players were a bit babyish. There's a ways to lose a match. But Luis Enrique lost his head completely, the manager of PSG.
He really did, grabbing Joao Pedro in the face. And this could have serious repercussions. Now, of course, it would not be a great surprise to anyone if FIFA were to issue a ban that also covered not only FIFA tournaments, but a more sort of global ban, if you like, that banned him from the touchline for a period of time. I think is fair to say, rather than just a couple of matches, because you don't expect to see something like that from a head coach. Of course, you had a similar situation with Paulo Fonseca at Lyon, where he didn't actually lay a hand on the referee.
No, it's the physical involvement that looks so unusual here.
Yes, that's right. And so you already have a situation where one of the biggest clubs in France have their coach banned from everything but UEFA games because he's banned domestically. The similar thing, given that there's this standoff between FIFA and UEFA at the moment. We know that Alexander Cheferin hasn't been to any of the games in the Club World Cup and has completely refused to engage
We'll get
with
on
it.
to that in 15 minutes and about what this Club World Cup was really about. But yes.
Yeah, so maybe we have the situation at the start of next season where Luis Enrique, like Paulo Fonseca, is banned from all the games apart from the UEFA ones.
Mad, isn't it? Absolutely mad. But if you haven't seen the scenes at the end of the game, I'd say it's quite unusual. You don't usually see the managers manhandling the opposition players. And now, of course, we don't know what's going on between all the individual human beings. But I think if you're a person of the standing of Luis Enrique in the game, if you're the coach of one of the champions of Europe, you cannot be grabbing the opposition players by the face. Joao Pedro, of course, made sure he's professional football. Of course, he made the most of it, as they say. But it really was Enrique's fault, and I'm surprised that maybe they were surprised. The Paris players needed to get involved there. Donnarumma was very close to it. I know he was also very emotional at the end, but he was big enough to drag the manager away, and perhaps he should have done that a bit earlier.
talkSPORT Breakfast, waking you up Monday to Friday morning from 6 a.m. on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.